Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session of Cyberweek 2020. This is our 22nd iteration of Cyberweek, if you can imagine it. And some of the people in this room are people who have been to many or most of those, as well as some relatively new faces, and that's the joy of Cyberweek. Every year, the ODR crowd, quote unquote, grows and shifts, adds new faces. And we hope that those who are new here, relatively new here, are interested in what you're hearing. I have a feeling you will be by what you hear today. The software we're about to see today is, speaking personally, is some of the most mind-boggling software and possibilities that I've seen in ODR. And I remember my reaction when I first saw it. But before getting into that, who is this? Me. Okay, I'm Noam Ebner. I'm a professor at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. I've been working in ODR for the past 15 plus-ish years in practice as a researcher, as a teacher. And I'm also part of the organizing team for Cyberweek for the past decade or more. With us today are two people who have been in this field forever and have been doing cutting edge work. And I'll introduce each of them briefly and hope that they will add on as pertinent what brought them here. But first I'll introduce Graham Ross, one of the first, or the first crop of fellows in the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution. From the very early days of ODR, Graham was a trailblazer. Things that I remember are his establishing of the mediationroom.com, which as an ODR platform offered mediators and mediation groups or companies the opportunity to conduct mediations on the platform. And this is back in the days where we all thought that mediation necessarily, or online negotiation needed a platform, and therefore people who were not designers or did not have that capacity to design platforms, there was a huge barrier for them dealing in ODR. And Graham kind of facilitated their entry into this field by saying, you don't need to understand design. Here's a room you can have. Here's a platform, a virtual room. So just as people could rent conference rooms to mediate in the face-to-face world, they could arrange for themselves a room in the virtual world. And that's only one of the companies that Graham has established. He has been a trainer in the field, again, forever. And in addition to his work on the, let's call it the replication, mediation replication online sort of field, Graham has also been involved increasingly, I think, in the artificial intelligence or the applied artificial intelligence side of this. Carissa Boynton has been on that side of the ODR field for the past X years, many double digits. She is, I'm not going to say your exact position because I probably, she is the queen.
Or my age.
of ICANN Systems, which is, some of you know it by its product or products now, of course, of Smartsettle, some of the most sophisticated software that has been integrated and familiar in the ODR community and to the ODR crowd for the past couple of decades, little more. It is a fascinating system and a very sophisticated system, and Carissa probably has more experience with it perhaps than almost anyone else on the planet. And they will be leading the session today. And the session today, I'll let them introduce most of it, but it basically wants to separate between the online surge into mediation that we've seen for the past 6 months mainly focuses on replicating mediation from the room, taking it online largely to video conferencing. Okay, so we're talking about jumping online to Zoom. And while that's a fascinating area, and here I'll advertise a little. On Friday, I hope to touch on that area, on that evolution of online Zoom in this space in the past 6 months, and to see what we can do from this point and onwards, building on this sudden new awareness. What we're going to speak about today is that mediating online via Zoom is perhaps the least of what technology has to offer dispute resolution or negotiation. In other words, that is a replication of a familiar process, but might there be ways to use technology in order to enhance the process, or beyond that, to enhance parties' experience with the process, and beyond that, to enhance outcomes? And Smartsettle, the products focus or tout and achieve enhanced outcomes. Of course, my advertisement was for my session. Smartsettle does not need me to advertise for it. But I will also say one thing on a personal note. I'm thrilled to be hosting this session. I've been with the ODR community for over 15 years, but my first face-to-face encounter with them was when I attended a conference in Liverpool in ODR. The ODR community used to have, and I hope will future have, an annual in-person meeting in addition to Cyberweek. And a number of years ago, it was in Liverpool, and it was hosted by Graham. I can still hear in my head ferry across the Mersey, and I remember that every session there was opened by the speaker trying to apply a Beatles line to their songs. Past
well, if it just put in there, Noam, we actually had Jerry Marsden singing for us over dinner.
And it's stuck in my mind ever since.
He led the second most popular group after the Beatles in Liverpool, and the only one to have the first 3 records #1. Even the Beatles didn't.
And I'll add on just a personal note, is that I remember walking into the room. The first thing that caught my mind is caught my eye is probably the reason that Carissa can tell us exactly how long ago that conference was.
I can.
2007.
I remember. Is it Isaac?
Or was it 5?
Isaac, yes, I was there with
holding Isaac as a baby, and I'm sure that Isaac is now taller than I am.
He's taller than me, yes.
Okay.
So Isaac was 6 months old at that conference, and he's 14 now. So.
Okay. So personally, thank you for welcoming me face to face into that world. And wow, the fact that I get to now say, and now over to you, is thrilling for me. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here, everybody. Graham, Carissa, take it away.
Yep. A great pleasure, and thank you, Noam, for inviting me in that introduction. In fact, as to the International Forum, that was the 5th one. Yes, we had it in 2007. 2 years ago, we had a separate one I ran, which a lot of the fellows of the International Centre for Online Dispute Resolution attended and spoke. We had, in fact, the first one, by the way, I believe Richard Susskind gave a presentation just before. Yes. Richard was one of the 2 keynote speakers in Liverpool on that day, if you remember. And the video of that wonderful presentation from Richard is still available on my iTunes account somewhere. But the one a few years ago was interesting and relevant to today because we wanted to show the strength and power of Infinity, which you're all going to see today. But we wanted to give it a real test of a very complicated dispute, see how it got its teeth into it. So we thought, what's the most complicated dispute? Oh, I know, Brexit. What would be a Brexit negotiation with the EU? And we managed to settle it in 2 hours. It's taken about 3 or 4 years so far, and we still haven't got it. Well, anyway, enough of that. It's a great pleasure to really introduce and talk about these products. They are different, as you've explained. And the point I always make to people is that this is not an alternative to some of these wonderful platforms that are being developed, like Crec and Modron, where one can place ones and have mediation discussions on. It's something that can be used with any other system of ADR, including, of course, traditional face-to-face mediation. It focuses on the negotiation. Now, and I've always been enthused by the presentations by Ernie Thiessen, the head of Smartsettle, who I met at the second International Forum in Geneva. I think that was 2003. So we all go back a long way. Anyway, let me just pull up what we're going to do is I'm going to do some slides to try to explain some key takeaways for everybody so they can understand what these products are. Firstly, with Smartsettle 1, which is a visual blind bidding system. You might wonder about the use of the word visual. We'll explain that. And then Carissa is going to help us look at a live demonstration so we can then see it in operation. We'll then have a little break, a little intermission, whatever you feel, 5 or 10 minutes. And then I'll do some slides to explain the more complicated Infinity. And again, with Carissa's help, we'll go through a sample role play of how it might be utilized. So let me, without further ado, share my screen. Wait a minute. Where are we? Share screen. Yeah. Okay. Right. Do you see my slides? I need to right, from Zoom to Infinity and Beyond. Do you see that? Yeah, thank you. Okay. So here we are, Ned Ludd, one of the first people to make a big stand against technology, the looms and machines. And very much.
You doing homework?
What was that? Okay, very much. Whilst many of us have been extolling the wonders and benefits of online dispute resolution, you tend to get quite a resistance. I wouldn't call people Luddites like Mr. Ludd, but people understandably are worried about how machines can help them resolve disputes and mediate better than they with all their experience. And I speak as a mediator myself. And as Ned probably would say if he was shown online dispute resolution, oh, you can't read emotion online. Well, or can you? I noticed this mood sweater that somebody was advertising that changes color according to mood. But anyway, all of a sudden that's changed with the pandemic. And we go back to a 1950s hit. People have had one look at Zoom and their hearts have gone boom, and they got very excited about it. So all of a sudden, everybody wants to know about ODR. But of course, with a lot of people, and I see this with a lot of training courses in ODR, that they train in Zoom and believe that is ODR. ODR is so much more than that, of course it is. And I'm sure you will understand by attending Cyberweek the rich variety of ways in which technology can add value to the process of trying to help people resolve disputes. You're just seeing a screenshot. This is a blatant commercial plug for my training course at odrtraining.com. I've just in fact added, this is a free access here to some information about tips about web conferencing and all that sort of thing. But that's available at the site. Now, the question is, what happens when this fella is defeated? Will everybody go back to, oh, you can't mediate except in person? Well, I hope not. And certainly what Smartsettle have got, I think, will help us go literally to infinity. And I would hope we'll be back in years to come and go beyond and see what else comes out. So what we really have at the moment of an overview of what's available is on the left-hand side, various non-ODR specific, not dispute resolution specific products like email or Zoom, WebEx Teams and all the others. But I say non-specific, they're not designed or used purely for dispute resolution, but they're very useful for dispute resolution. And then on the right, we have the ODR specific ones, and they divide into the case management communication platforms, such as Modron and Correct, Resolve Disputes Online, Troct, and others, which are extremely useful and convenient platforms on which to place your mediations, and also in all these cases and all these examples to be able to have text-based discussions. And then on the right, I can't quite see it because I've got to move the little Zoom thing. Right, those that are aids to negotiation that make and improve the prospects of negotiating successfully. And they include at the top the ones we're going to see now by Smartsettle. There's also Asset Divider or Family Winner, similar system developed by Professor John Zalesnikoff in Melbourne. Some of you may know it. I won't go into details on it, but it's a very using game theory to help people reach agreement on dividing assets, say after a divorce, dividing the matrimonial items and that sort of thing. And basically it's on the premise that normally when people within a very negative emotional relationship, because they're going through a divorce, they're in a difficult position in trying to negotiate for what they feel is a fair division of the matrimonial assets. And often they will put as much energy into, such as the emotion, as much energy into denying the other spouse what they may want, as much as to seek what they want. And so this gets round this by a clever system involving applying points to the items. Another perhaps very interesting developments, it more involving the needs for mediators in this than technology itself, although it's got a very neat technology platform, and it really, in short term, it helps with the reframing of positions in a dispute to help the parties. So it's sort of an advance on the traditional techniques of that mediators practice in any event. So now we'll look at the Smartsettle systems. By the way, this one won last year. I did succeed in encouraging people who had a case in the small claims court in England to use it. And though their case had been in the court for 3 months, it had actually gone through the court mediation process, which is a form of telephone mediation. They quickly learned about the system you're about to see and settled it within 1 hour. But these are the key takeaways. I've explained it's a standalone system and it can be used with any system. So if you're mediating in person or on the telephone, or you're using Modron or Crec or other systems, at any point you can introduce the parties to what you're about to see. It's not in competition with. It's not a either or. It's important to know that unlike that article I just showed you, it's not really the robot settling the case, coming up with a figure and saying this is what your agreement is, because no settlement in one is ever reached or announced unless it's within the specified bidding range of each party. In other words, each party has said, I'm prepared to pay or receive that amount of money or more or less. But it always settles only in an area that both parties agree. But of course, it helps the parties to come to that agreement much more efficiently than without using one. There's no really fee to use it because so confident is our Smartsettle, I suppose, into the success ratio of the system that there'll be a payment. This is based on what's called the negotiating range, which you'll see in a minute, only if it's settled. So there's no barriers to anybody trying it out if they want to use it. It will only apply, unlike Infinity, which you'll see after the break, it will only apply if there's a single numerical issue, which usually would be the amount of money that one party pays to the other, or It could be a number of months and time over a payment, or it could be a number of items provided. But whatever, as long as it's a number, then one will help the parties significantly to reach agreement on that. And it's constantly nudging the party. What I like about both these systems is that it helps the parties, whilst in most disputes there may be an issue of liability, and obviously the mediator will help the parties take the emotion out of it and understand the strengths and weaknesses of their case, what would happen, the BATNA, what would happen if it doesn't settle, what would happen if it goes to court, the risks in the court and the costs and all that sort of thing. And only partly deals with trying to finalize an actual agreement. Both these systems help the parties to focus much more of their time in trying to reach agreement on a settlement. Obviously, the media will still spend the time and use his or her skill as normal in helping parties deal with the issues of liability. But this not only helps to focus on this, but also has constant nudges in it to not leave positions, not to allow people to just stand on their position. It's constantly nudging you to move forward to try and get a settlement. So the first thing that using one is you agree what's called a single negotiating framework. It's basically the agreement that you would have, and you may put in lots of terms or conditions of the agreement, and the only thing that's missing is the amount of money, and that goes there. There's a blank. And once there is a settlement on the system, now this is subject to what's agreed at the outset. So if you agree at the outset that if the system does reach an agreement, that is binding, then that number will go there. It'll go there anyway, but if you've agreed it's binding, you agree to be bound by that agreement. You could, there's no reason why you couldn't actually all sides agree that you use Smartsettle 1, or indeed Infinity, on a without prejudice, subject to contract, non-binding basis. That's a matter for the mediator or the parties if they're trying to negotiate directly. So what we're going to show is one sort of dispute, Ed has provided certain consultancy services, Ed's on the right, for which he charges £2,000. Dan's very unhappy at the quality of that service and doesn't want to pay anything. So Ed is thinking of suing him. It's very similar to the case that went through the courts. What you're looking at is exactly as it looks to the parties, except there will also be some chat boxes, which we'll see a bit later. But let's just focus on this most important thing, which is the scale on which they use to try and negotiate how much will be paid by Dan to Ed. Now, the top one, and here you see Ed has made a move, is visible to Dan on the left, the one in green. So you see that he's prepared to reduce his claim for 2,000 down to 1,900. Big deal, not a great effort, is it? But he's also moving the yellow one. Now, the yellow one goes down to 1,800. That is not seen by Dan. That is the blind bid. The green one is the visual. The yellow one at the bottom is the blind bid. Dan only sees the green bid. Dan makes his opening offer that he's prepared to pay 500 quid because he got some value out of it. And obviously he's worried that he may lose the case and have to pay the whole lot. But he also puts a secret bid himself. Now here, this is where it strays from the way it is when you use it. Because Ed won't see Dan's secret bid, we've shown it here as a gray line. And you see that Dan rather has been prepared secretly to go up to 800. So these are like the private, final positions at that stage that people are prepared to go to. He's prepared to go to 800, but he doesn't want anyone to know that. Oops. Apologize for this alert. Let it play out its little tune. It's not a call. Anyway, there's, no, I'm just going to have to press something. Right, sorry about that. I'm also my lighting man, just to give some light to my face, because I looked a bit in the shadow before. Right, so there's a huge gap there of £1,000. There's no settlement. This is the first round. It's not the end of it. Both sides are told that there's no real settlement yet. So they carry on and see if they're prepared to. Dan increases his open bid and said, look, I'm prepared to go further to 700. Let's settle this. And he's also prepared to go further to 1100 on his secret bid. So we can speed these things up. Ed increases his visible demand and also makes quite a significant increase in his secret demand to 14. So, right, we're looking at a gap here of only £300 out of a claim that was 2,000. We're getting closer, and let's see what goes on from there. But it announces no settlement. Now, smaller visible demand by Ed on the right, but a very big but final secret offer to 1,250, still less than the highest that Dan is prepared to go to. Dan increases his visible offer. These visible offers is really, you might ask, what's the purpose if you've got secret offer? But the visible offers should be used in a way to reflect the real interest people have in trying to settle these. Doesn't mean that they've made a higher secret bid. But now look what's happened. He's actually been prepared to go up to 1,500. So he wasn't prepared to pay anything to begin with. Now he's prepared to go up to 15, whereas Ed is prepared to accept 1,250. So there's been an overlap. We'll come to the situation later where there's no overlap. But in reality, it's not too unexpected, I suppose, that people might end up with overlapping secret bids. Clearly, Dan doesn't want to have to be sued, and Ed's clearly not pleased about having to pay all the legal fees and etc. in taking Dan to court. And there may be other aspects. He may want to do more work for Dan. He doesn't want to damage the relationship, so he would like to settle it. These are the discussions that will perhaps go on through with the help of the mediator, of course. So what does the system do here? There's an overlap of 300 between 1,200 and 15. So any settlement within that range is a win-win because both sides agree to it, whether it's 1,200, 1,300, 14, 1450. That's always going to be within a figure that both sides have been happy to settle at. But how does the system work? Well, the obvious way would be perhaps to split the difference. In fact, when I had developed a long time ago an early blind bidding system, nowhere near as powerful as this one, which was called We Can Settle, and then added it to the mediation room, as no mentioned the mediation room. We did it then just split the difference. But if you think about it, it does two things. Firstly, it rewards the party that holds back and makes less move because it's saying, come closer and come closer. And when we get a overlap or any other difference or a shortage, splitting it gives no advantage to the party that's made more effort. So by giving no advantage to the party that makes no effort, it actually, in a sense, rewards the party that holds back. So the algorithm that's been developed here wants to change that. It wants to encourage the parties to make effort to settle. And it does this by the reward early effort algorithm, which will now work out and announce a settlement more favorable to the party who made more effort. And how does it do that? Well, partly because that overlap is what we call a zone of possible agreement. Which party had the smallest last move to get into that zone? Because obviously that would be the party that made more effort to get into that agreement zone. And hang on. Ed's last move was only 200, whereas Dan's was 400. So Ed had made more effort. He'd got closer to the zone earlier than Dan with a smaller move. And so it announces a settlement at 1400, not 1350, which is the midpoint, but at 1400, it gives an extra 50 quid to Ed for making more effort. In all of these systems from Smartsettle, algorithms are built in to encourage people to make more effort. So that's the way it's settled in an overlap. And of course, the 1400 is then automatically entered into the agreement, which can be printed out and signed. Now, what if there's a gap? What if there's no overlap? So here's another system. We've changed the gender, similar sort of case, similar sort of figures, £2,000 claimed, the lady on the right. And the final secret bids by both of them where the payer who owes money was prepared to go to 1,000, and the person who provided the service for which she wanted 2,000 is prepared to go down to 1,300. So again, there's a gap of 300. Now, what happens here is another algorithm comes into place. Yeah. Sorry, was that a question or no? No. If there are any questions, I'll answer them when we get to the break after this, which we won't be far off. Looking at the time. So another algorithm called the automatic deal closer. And that allows, this comes up every time you make a movement, as you see when Carissa takes us through a live role play shortly. This pops up, and when you make a move, it then says, well, if there is still a gap, do you want to divide it by reward early effort algorithm? You can say no, or you can hit the radio button that says yes, in which case you can say how much more. So in other words, would you like to make a small increase if and only if it succeeds in a settlement? So it's that little last extra mile to go through to try and settle it. And if that, and you see the top lady on the left has made a small movement from 1,000 to 1,200 under that algorithm, and lady on the right has moved down to 1,100. So there is an overlap finally using that algorithm. Now, this is really, this is an extra facility for companies that are dealing with high volumes of similar claims. It could be insurance companies or holiday companies, flight companies or whatever. And what this does, if they're dealing with large numbers of claims, they can actually enter all their bids in the different sessions in advance. So here, session 1, they're prepared to go visible bid of 50, a secret bid of 53. They can add a little message to the chat box, which you'll see in a second. Round 2, you might think, well, why would people want to do that? Well, if you're handling a large number of claims and you want your claims handlers to negotiate on similar cases in a fairly consistent way, maybe they're flight delay cases or something that all have the same arguments. So you're much more efficient. You can have less skilled claims handler dealing with these cases in which you've actually entered in advance the way the bids will go, and the system will enter these bids automatically. Now, as I said, there is in fact a chat facility. So when you go through, it's the last screen before the intermission. So you see the slider, the bidding scale on the bottom, but you will always have these chat rooms. Now, if it's a mediated dispute, there'll be 3 of them. The one in the middle is the conversations that the mediator will have with both parties at the same time, and the ones on the side, left and right, are for the private, confidential discussions the mediator have with each party separately. You may comment quite rightly that these seem rather small boxes squeezed in, but at any time you can click on this double-headed arrow in the top right-hand corner of each box and expand it to full screen. Right, so at that point, we'll just now, before we go on to infinity and have a quick break, Carissa will just take us through the actual system itself in a very quick run through of a live case. Are you ready, Carissa?
I am, yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I think if I just share, it'll stop yours and share mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this is, I'm going to run through a demo of Smartsettle 1. This is go.smartsettle.com, and that's where our latest features live. We have a number of branded sites out there, Graham's being one of them at the Resolver. And Smartsettle 1 can also be installed by an API, which we show off at the International E-Negotiation Exhibition, which I think many of you have taken advantage of the free sign up there this week. Signing up here is free. Anybody is welcome to sign up here. And you can see me signing in. And then by default, you will be given a negotiator account. So you can see here that I've got quite a number of cases in my negotiator dashboard. Later on, if you were to go through the training, become a Smartsettle certified facilitator, you could be given a mediator account. And then you would have another dashboard for those cases. And today, I think we're just going to look at Smartsettle 1 from the negotiator's point of view. So I'm going to hit the new case button there. And here you can settle a case, you can practice with a friend or practice with the robot. I'm going to practice with the robot today. And so we have a number of example cases here. This one here is the one in Graham's demo. So any of you could try that one, or anything that interests you here, you're welcome to come on and try it. I'm going to go first to just a quick negotiation panel demo. The robot plays in 3 different styles: collaborative, competitive, and avoidant. I'm just going to play against the collaborative robot today. You can see our robot's name is R2D2, so you can't accuse us of not having any sense of humor. Okay, so here we have the issue, and I'm going to call that a settlement amount. Because this is a robot case, some of these other drop-down boxes are filled in for us already. But we have many different units, and you can choose, if you're doing a real estate sale here in Vancouver, BC, where we are, you would want to negotiate in thousands, because our houses go for, easily 800,000 would be a normal price for a house, maybe even low in Vancouver. Okay, so here we just have one chat box because we're just negotiating with one other party. And you can see we've got our visual blind bidding panel here. We've got high values on the left-hand side. That's our opponent. By default, you're going to be on the right-hand side. And so we're going to start with our visible bid here. We're going to move that over to the left just a little bit right now in this first session. And then you can see, okay, high values has sent us a visible bid of 2077.5. And our secret bid has shown up here as well at 1550. And the reason that that secret bid shows up exactly where the visible bid is because logically you just can't have a secret acceptance that's lower than your visible acceptance. So I'm going to pull that secret bid over to, let's say, 1710. We're negotiating in sessions here. So you might want to agree beforehand how many sessions you're going to negotiate in. You have unlimited number of sessions, but if you've already gone down as far as you can, after session 1, you're able to declare any session as final. So I'm going to update that secret bid. Automatic deal closer is our small impasse algorithm that Graham talked about. So we can say if the other person, say that they're at 1750 and that I'd be happy to make that a deal, then I can put that number in here. So say even I'm going to say if they're within 100 of me, then I'm happy to close that gap. I'm going to end the session, check for agreement. No agreement yet. I can try again in session 2. So you can see here now that I can declare session 2 as final if I want to. I'm not interested in declaring final session yet. Okay, so we received another visible offer from high values, and we'll make a visible offer too down to 1650. And I'm going to say yes, update that. And I'm going to pull my secret down to 1840. That sounds good to me. End session and check for agreement. Yes, I'm going to do that. Automatic deal closer. Sure. We'll say if they're, we'll just take that down a little bit. If they're within 50, what are we negotiating in dollars here? $50 of me, then I'll say that that's close enough. End session 2, and we got a deal. And it's actually quite good for us, which means that the robot made a secret bid that was all the way up here somewhere. And then we were already in that zone of agreement then in our first session. And so we're rewarded quite well there. Now, the reward early effort algorithm, the way that works is that question was asked in the chat, is that the overlap is divided in the same ratio as the party's last moves. So if the last moves were 8 units to 4 units, then the overlap would be divided in that same ratio. So we can go back and do another case. Maybe we should look at Graham's case. How about that, Graham? And then you'll see the longer process. So we'll do the collaborative robot again. And I won't read through this whole description because you probably remember it from the PowerPoint. So we'll
Carissa, looking at Noam's comment about R2D2 being particularly combative, we might change it to Holly from Red Dwarf, the Computing Red Dwarf, who has an IQ of 6,000, has lost it and is senile as a computer robot. So is probably a lot more prepared to concede with everything.
My contribution to the world of ODR. I'll sign off now.
Thank you, Noam.
Okay, I will take that up with the powers that be, that we need to make sure we've got a collaborative robot in there. A collaboratively named robot.
Senile robot.
A senile robot. Would people still think it was clever? Okay, so you can see here that we've got a longer intake process. Step 1, you just confirm that we've got the right email address for you. You don't want to miss notifications that come into your inbox to say that it's your turn. So negotiations can happen synchronously or asynchronously. We're all dealing with different time zones these days. So you might make your move while the opponent is asleep. And vice versa. So okay, we're playing Ed. So we're gonna go to the next. Here's the description of the case. So what we want in here is we want the undisputed facts, things that both parties have already agreed to. And negotiations often have a few more issues than just one. So in the last panel, we're settling that money issue, right? But you would want to agree ahead of time and put it in here, the due date, for example. This is going to be paid within 30 days. Or if you're negotiating, who's going to pay what for the fence you're building with your neighbor, you're going to want to say the fence is going to be built by, by next summer. Either party is allowed to make any statements that they wish, and those would also go into the final agreement. Documents, if you have documents to upload, you can do that here. Now, often what we say as a process is, don't worry about it at this stage. It's optional, and just go into that visual blind bidding panel and see if you can solve it. Because what we're finding is that negotiations do solve really quickly. Smartsettle 1 is currently in trials with the Canadian government and the First Nations here in BC. And cases are solving so quickly because you can be transparent about your lowest offer without any risk. And that's the key that's allowing cases to solve. Okay, so here we've got our British pounds. They prefer 0, we prefer 2,000, and that's our issue setup. We're going to go into the framework. So this is the first algorithm that we've got in Smartsettle 1, the single negotiating framework. We've got the 2 parties, we've got the undisputed facts, we've got the party statements, and then we've got our settlement. So regardless of anything stated above, the matter shall be fully settled as follows. Ed and Dan have agreed on an amount of, and that's the blank that you're going to negotiate in the next screen. And that gets filled in automatically once you've got an agreement on the visual blind bidding panel. And pre-acceptance of this agreement is equivalent to digital signature when completed. Complementary physical signatures are recommended in some cases. So Graham talked about whether or not this is binding or not. And our preference is, of course, that if you're going to enter into the negotiation and come to an agreement, let's let that be binding. But that would, of course, be up to the practitioners and the parties. I negotiated a payment with my son, and I said it was going to be binding, but I don't think he agreed. That was a fun. It's always fun to negotiate cases. I have got 3 boys now, not just the one that was in Liverpool. So here we are.
Right. Of course, yes.
Yeah.
Remember.
Yeah.
Our youngest delegate.
That's right. That's right. So here we've reached the visual blind bidding panel again, and we're going to negotiate. And so let's see. I can try and mirror the numbers, Graham, that were in your presentation, although I don't remember exactly what they were. So we've got 454 from Dan. So, there's 4 ways to reach an agreement with Smartsettle 1. I could just drag my visible bid all the way to 454 and just accept his visible bid. That's the first way. And then the second way, and the most common way, is, of course, to create that overlap with the secret bids. I'm going to end the session and check for agreement. I'm going to say no this time to the automatic deal closer. And no agreement in session 1. Not surprised by that. We're going to keep negotiating in session 2. I'm going to make a visible concession. And so did Dan. Let's show him that. We want to show him, that we're still here. We're still making some effort. And I'll move this one to 1300. I'm going to end the session. I'll still say no to the ADC. Oh, we got a deal already. I was hoping we wouldn't get a deal, and then I was going to show you the expert neutral deal closer. So if you have a larger impasse at the end, you can apply our large impasse algorithm, which is the expert neutral deal closer. And that does involve some humans. And so you need to have an expert neutral roster available for that expert neutral deal closer algorithm to work. So in this case, both parties would have to agree to it. The Smartsettle works in party-controlled outcomes, right? The parties are always in control of how they're reaching this agreement. One is never going to impose any solution on them. So if both parties agree to use the expert neutral deal closer, what we're going to do is we're going to ask 3 experts for their opinion of fair. I know fair is a controversial word, but that's why I put the quotes around it. So then we're going to ask those 3 experts for their opinions. We're going to throw out the 2 outliers, and we're going to use the middle opinion as our idea of fair. Then whoever is closest to that value, that middle value, whether that's Dan or Ed, would then get rewarded in the final deal. So now, yeah, did everybody get that? Are you following the chat, Graham, to see if there's any questions in there we need to answer?
Well, yeah, I was just, let me just see, was it, Chuck was saying, so with Smartsettle 1, would an encouraged negotiating strategy be to start with a more compromising amount and then make small adjustments each stage? And I haven't yet answered, but if I can give you my view, I think the answer obviously yes, in that's encouraging to reach a settlement. You want people not to stick on their positions, but I would have to say, first of all, if there's a mediator involved, of course, that depends, and it's for him to perhaps give his view, and it may be related, still subject to the personalities, the relationship between the parties. So I don't think there's no one rule on it, but obviously if you open up a bit more and to begin with, you're going to encourage a bigger step by the other side. It's human nature, but there's no rooms, and I think the point I'm trying to always keep making with mediators, and this obviously the parties can use it themselves outside of mediation, but is that their skills in mediation still apply exactly the same way as they would if they weren't using Smartsettle 1.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yes, it depends.
Yeah,
that's the answer.
Yeah. I would definitely recommend that kind of strategy where you go down quickly to where you think the reasonable outcome is, and then you just make smaller moves after that. Get into the zone of agreement quickly, and then reward early effort will reward you for that in the final outcome.
I like the idea that, unlike making an offer without prejudice in writing or email or in any sort of traditional way, and then sitting on it because you want the other party to think that's my final offer. Yeah. I like the fact that you can, and a lot of time can be spent and wasted in the negotiating dance, as it's called, and even if the other party thinks it's quite attractive, the offer, and perhaps he doesn't want to say anything straight away or make any further movement, in the hope that the first person will make another movement himself. I just like the way that, because the secret bids are secret, the sort of temptation to straight away go a little bit further than you have in an open way.
Absolutely. We basically eliminate that negotiation dance, and with the current trials that we're already doing, I mean, we're saving people so much time. I mean, you can imagine how much time cases take if they have to go through the lawyers and the court system and these very formal processes. But if the parties themselves want to try and settle it, just the 2 of them, try this alternative process. And then, like we settled a case last week in 2 hours. Instead, the clients were really happy.
By the way, yeah, I have to mention, and I know everyone's going to say, oh, come on, Graham, not really. Truthfully, honestly, I had my house up for sale last year, and the guy who we had a few bit of negotiation, and it was a young techie guy, and I mentioned Smartsettle 1, and he thought he was quite interested, and he readily agreed to using it, and I sold my house using Smartsettle 1. Really did. And because, of course, we're talking about in dispute resolution application, but it's negotiating any sort of thing with a number it can be useful for.
Yeah, absolutely. We've always resisted the label ODR, because we do see ourselves as much more than ODR and really more of a negotiation support system. And we prefer to be in there early before it turns into a dispute, right? Let's negotiate it early. Let's preserve those relationships. Let's do all that.
So, right. Thank you very much, Carissa. I think, Noam, do you want me to carry straight on? Let me share my screen.
Entirely your call, Graham, Carissa.
Or
Entirely your call.
I did say perhaps we could have a 5 or 10-minute break. Are we all right for time there? In which case, okay. Well,
we need to end the session by 45 after the hour to clean it up and
okay.
straighten it up for the next session. But the rest of the time is entirely yours to decide.
Sorry, we need to end it when?
In 45 minutes.
45 minutes, 48 minutes from now. I'm not going to give it an hour because we're in 3 separate time zones, Carissa, you and I. So we have 48 minutes. Use them as you wish.
Exactly right. Well, tell you what, let's just have literally 5. If anybody wants to come for a break or have a top up their coffees.
Excellent. Okay. So we'll reconvene. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes, everybody, to see the next part of this. So at 3 minutes after the hour, whatever hour it happens to be.
Great. See you in 5 minutes.
No, there is no work. It's finished.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. What we're going to see now is the other product of Smartsettle called Smartsettle Infinity. This is a much more complicated matter facility, but it is extremely powerful. And let me show a couple of slides and to try to position this and to clarify what it is. First of all, before I explain what you're looking at now, I assume you're looking at a screen of Infinity, 3-section screen. This is something that my view of how the mediator would work this, the first thing that has to be done here, what this is doing is helping people reach an agreement where there are a number of issues or items or elements that would be in the settlement. So for example, what you're looking at now, it was a business-to-business dispute between a manufacturer and a customer, regular customer who now in this particular case, so he's been buying these products, the business customer, for a long time, but there's a dispute and there are a number of issues to try and resolve. One is how much he pays the seller for the items, allowing for the criticism problems he's had. He might want to make a payment conditional on offering to do further trade, because obviously there's no point just settling the dispute between regular business partners if the relationship is going to end there, and the customers won't normally continue to buy from a supplier who takes them to court and doesn't listen to what they think are reasonable complaints. And even if he wins the case, he may suffer a much greater financial loss by not getting any more further business. So continuing the continuity of the business relationship is important. So one might have a settlement involved a payment and some commitment to some further orders. There might be some sort of review on LinkedIn or somewhere that was pretty negative to the seller, which has possibly had some effect on his trade. It does happen to have a client who suffered very badly from bad reviews. So maybe there's a condition in the settlement that would be withdrawn or not. There may be services in kind can be given, or there may be also a question to agree the goods returned. So what we're looking at is various elements of what a resolution might be. And what Infinity does is it really requires the parties to start to agree on what those elements fairly early on, and helps people focus on an outcome rather than who was right and who was wrong, and the issues of law that may apply or have to be considered if it's not resolved. And what it then does after the parties have agreed what these elements are, each party has to indicate to the system, to Infinity, to the robot, whatever you want to call it, to Holly or R2D2, how important that particular issue is to them. And you'll see when Carissa takes us through a live case, how that is done. And so the system builds up a knowledge of what's important and how important particular elements are as part of an overall settlement package. The system then gives a value to those packages. And that value is an aid to the party to see what may be more in their interest. Let's not assume everybody automatically can do the calculations in a complicated settlement as to end value to them. So the system does that. It then encourages the each side. And by the way, that process of identifying how important it is, how important, for example, is it to the seller, the vendor, the manufacturer, that the online review, which is negative, is withdrawn. It may be he's not interested in that at all. It's not a problem for him. It may be he's got far too much work and he doesn't mind. And indeed, the further trade may not be an issue of importance to him because he may get plenty of business anyway. He doesn't need the customer. So so he could tell the system how little that interest is, and we'll show how he does that. On the other hand, it could be very important. He could be losing a lot of business. So it's part of the skill of the medium. It's something that he would do anyway without all this, but this just makes it so much more convenient and helpful to the mediator. What it's actually doing is helping the mediator do the job and apply the skill that he would normally apply, but it's like an extra tool for him. It's like, it's not a threat to the mediator. It's much like a mediator might use a calculator, or a mediator might use spreadsheets to help in some complicated mathematical calculation that he needs to go through when trying to assist the parties to reach a resolution. What are the implications? So we can look on Infinity as not a threat to mediators, to the way they do their business. In fact, it benefits from mediators helping the parties. This is too complicated for the parties to operate. And it enables them, but their core skill is needed really to better identify the interest levels and the significance and values of each item for each party. Although, of course, they can do that themselves. They're then encouraged to put together a number of these packages, and it evaluates them. And at any point they can, it says published, if you see that top right-hand quarter there of the page, they can at any time be published. That doesn't mean they're sent to the local newspaper. It means that it's simply sent to the other party sees the package that the other party may have found acceptable to him or her. And there may be variations of these packages. The negotiation goes around in rounds, sessions, and you can put up as many sessions, packages you can publish or send to the other side as you find it would be acceptable. It then, when it shows it to the other party, it doesn't show the value it has given to you, the person presenting the package. It then shows to the receiving party the value based on that party's level of interest in each of the issues. Obviously, this levels of interest and significance, importance will vary between the parties. and that guides that party into what might be acceptable. At any stage, and this is the bit I really enjoy with it, at any stage you can ask the computer, ask Infinity to work out a package. And Infinity will do that to try to find some optimum value packages for each party. What would it likely be that both parties would find acceptable? And they are then presented. And even more interesting, either side can masquerade a proposal as being from Infinity. In other words, he can make a proposal himself. And by the way, you do it by moving these sliders on the scales on the left-hand side. But the system on instruction will tell you the side, not that this is a proposal by your opponent, but a proposal by the computer, although it isn't. But that's because, of course, people sometimes might, where there's an offer that should be sensible for them to accept, might not accept it purely because it was from the other party with whom he has maybe a bad relationship and doesn't want to accept anything the other party offers. So I think that's a sort of an overview and the significance of this system. It is a tool, a very powerful tool to people negotiating or mediators helping people to negotiate, or it could be that each side has their own lawyer. You may say, well, it sounds a bit complicated. And when you see Carissa show you it, you say, well, oh, I'm not quite sure. How much will it take for me to learn how to do that? Initially, we can provide guidance in the setting up. So the first thing is to set up those, what you're seeing on the left-hand side, 5 issues to include in a package of proposals. I'm actually going through some of these and developing templates, so off-the-shelf templates. So you can have a tailor-made framework for a negotiation, particularly useful if there's a volume of similar cases, like, for example, disputes against insurance companies who are refusing to pay business disruption policies caused by COVID-19 and the pandemic. There's a case in the UK recently where they claimed that they weren't liable under the terms of their insurance, and the court found against them, but it's subject to appeal at the moment. But clearly, if they lose that appeal, the insurance companies, then there'll be a huge volume of disputes, but in many ways are very similar issues. So that's the way that is. And here's another more complicated one dealing with damages. You can see quite a lot of proposals, some of them suggestions in the top right-hand corner. I've done, in fact, one I think, Noam, I would do recently, I've just done a 3-page article as a sort of introduction for mediators and other dispute resolution professionals into Infinity, saying much what I've just said now, but probably in a far better way and adding a lot more, which perhaps I'm happy to upload it somewhere for everybody to look at. In fact, I'm going to add it to the training course.
If you send me a link to that, we can put it into the Cyberweek agenda, and anybody can go and look for it there.
I will. Excellent. I've just noted, yeah, okay. So I think at this point, can I hand over to Carissa to perhaps take us through a live case? Is that all right, Carissa?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Ready?
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. So what you're looking at here is Smartsettle Infinity. And we're just going to run through a pretty simple case with Infinity just to orient you to how it works. But as Graham said, we can support extremely complicated cases like Brexit. Any kinds of complexity you can throw at us, we can handle it. So this is just a two-party case with 4 issues. And you've got the parties there, and we've got our 4 issues here. We've got our, this was about a holiday home rental. So we've got the return of the deposit, the guarantee for the same month in 2021, 1% off of that 2021, and then the removal of the bad review. So this is a shared information screen. Both parties, or all 3 parties, or any number of parties have access to this shared information. So they need to agree just on this list of issues. And what we say is that any party can bring any issue to the table that they want to. And then they each provide their ends of the negotiation to produce a negotiating range for each issue. So now we're going to go into the graphic view of Mike Brown, the tourist, and we're going to look at the rest of this negotiation from his point of view. And normally in a real negotiation, this view would be password protected, only available to the facilitator and Mike. If Mike is trained, then he can use this himself, or the facilitator would guide him through it. And you can do that with, Zoom screen sharing, just like we're doing right now. You need to think of Smartsettle Infinity as just another tool, like your Excel spreadsheet is a tool that you're using now. And before that, it was the calculator. Before that, it was the slide rule. Now we've got Smartsettle Infinity. It's moving from a station wagon to a sports car. So we've got our issues here. You can see we've got our list of issues, and we've got our range identified for each issue, and we've oriented that so that Mike's best income is on the right-hand side. So % off next year, he prefers 100% off. Who wouldn't? Return of deposit, he'd like his entire deposit back. That was $1,000. Guarantee for the same month, yes, he would like that. And removal of the bad review, no, he doesn't really want to remove it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through these issues and say, well, Mike, how important are all these issues to you? And what we've done here, you can see that on this issue that goes from $0 to $1,000, we've put 1,000 points on that issue. And that just makes it so that 1 point is worth $1. Right? It makes it very easy to analyze and look at this negotiation. So % off next year, well, that's worth $5,000 to him, because combined that rental, the rental was actually $7,000 for the month, but he thinks it's worth a little bit less, and that represents the risk of possibly not being able to go in 2021 as well. Guarantee for the same month, that's worth about $100 to him. He would like that month, but he's pretty happy to go in any month as well. Removal of the bad review, that's only worth $10 to him, so he'd be pretty happy to do that. It's just mostly just a matter of one more thing to do. So now in Infinity, we negotiate in packages, and we encourage the parties to make some packages to help define their negotiation before they start. So Mike here has made 4 different packages. So a package has a value with an outcome for each issue. So this is an optimistic outcome. Mike does not think that he can get this outcome in the negotiation. So he's made a concession package, 75% off next year, $800 of the deposit returned, a guarantee for the same month in 2021, and he'll remove the bad review. That's his concession. And he's made a package that he thinks is a reasonable outcome at 30% off, $500 returned, no guarantee, and he removes the bad review. He thinks that would be a pretty reasonable outcome. And he's got a resistance package here where if he gets less than this, well, he's starting to feel that he needs to try a different method, maybe go to court for this, whatever other avenues there are, he would start thinking about those. So now you can see that we're pretty set up for our negotiation. We understand it pretty well. And the total value of this negotiation, if we add up all the numbers we've assigned here, we get $6,010. So the total value of this negotiation is $6,010. And say that if your preferences were not linear, right? I think we've got this removal of the bad review here. This is an optioned issue. So if Mike was pretty happy to remove that bad review, he could just pull that yes up there. Or if yes was almost as bad as replacing with a positive, he can pull it down. And that way, Infinity understands your preferences. I'll just say no to that. Guarantee for the same month, that's another optioned issue. Return of deposit, that's just a linear issue. And same with % off next year. So I could change this graph. For example, if it was really important to him to have, you know, at least 60, 70% off, I could pull that up to let Infinity know that that's how I'm satisfied along that particular issue. So let's start negotiating. Now that we're prepared, we're going to send our optimistic proposal into that published pane. We're going to send it over to the holiday home owner. Now, the robot is playing the role of the homeowner. I think her name was Christine. And Christine has already, because she's being played by the robot, her optimistic pack proposals are revealed at the same time. Okay, I'm going to propose that, and they're both going to show up here. So you can see that package 2, Mike Brown, is there, identical to that optimistic package. And Christine has sent us her optimistic, which is way over there. So with these initial optimistic packages, we haven't even narrowed the bargaining range. So let's ask Smartsettle Infinity now to generate some suggestions. So suggestions, as Graham was saying, are semi-optimal packages. So Infinity is looking at the preferences of the parties and generating packages that fall in between those two proposals. So you can see here, we've got a couple packages to consider now. And because we've done this work already of looking at and analyzing where our preferences are and where a reasonable outcome is, we think a reasonable outcome is about 2,105. And so package 3 is better than our reasonable outcome, but this is still session 1. So let's not accept that yet. Let's generate one more and see if we get something a little bit better. We've decided to send our concession in session 2. So let's try and stay above that. And here we go. We've got package number 5 now, worth 4,610. Let's accept that one. I'm gonna say yes to that. And then we're going to end session 1 and check if we have an agreement. Now, an agreement in Infinity, it basically happens the same way, except we're looking for an overlap in accepted packages rather than just on that single issue. I'm going to end the session, check for agreement. And at the moment, the only agreement that would be possible would be either package 2 or package 5. So I'm not too surprised that we don't have an agreement yet. So let's go into session 2 and let's send our concession over to Christine. We're going to propose that. And that shows up there at package 7. And Graham also talked about masquerades. So, and masquerades are a way to take any bias off the table. So let's publish this reasonable package as a masquerade. We're going to say publish suggestion, and then it's going to show up as package 9. let's see, right there, 2105. So let's accept that one. And now we can see that there's actually two packages here, package 3 and package 6, that are rated better than package 9. So at that point, I would say, well, logically, I should accept those because I've accepted something lower. If I were to take a look at those values and actually they're not acceptable to me, then I would want to reevaluate my preferences. I would want to understand why and fix it so that I'm giving Infinity the right data. Because the real power of Infinity is going to lie in the next step after we reach a baseline agreement. Okay, so now I'm going to end session 2 and see if we have a deal. Okay, package 9. So we have a deal, and it's okay. That is our reasonable outcome. So we're fairly satisfied with that. But the real power of Smartsettle Infinity is once you've reached a baseline, you can ask Infinity to analyze the preferences of both parties and see if it can come up with something better. And to do that, it uses an algorithm called maximize the minimum gain, which is very, very powerful. And look at that, we found an improvement, and that's worth $900 to Mike, our tourist. So he's pretty happy with that. He accepts that right away, and that becomes the new deal. And let's take a look and see what we actually did there. So what we agreed on was this orange package, 30% off, $500 returned, no guarantee for the same month. And we're going to remove the bad review. And then what we ended up with as an improvement is we're going to replace the bad review with a positive. No guarantee for the same month, so we can book any month. No deposit returned, but we're getting 58% off. So, and this is worth quite a lot to him, as that's a difference of what, a couple thousand for that booking. It's a luxury unit that he was booking.
So both sides would find either of them acceptable, but this one, the improvement, is that benefiting each of them over the baseline agreement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would only come up with an improvement where that happens, that both sides get increased value.
Yeah.
Great. And I think looking at that, I mean, if you just think about that, there's going to be there's loads of these disputes in the pandemic, and the parties don't need to argue over whether the person wanting to book the holiday in the house had good reason to cancel, when the reason was that they'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks when they got back, or whatever else it is. The parties will just be concentrating on, look, we've got to get a deal. We have a problem. He wants his money back. And I just love that change of focus onto settling it, because these are it's uncharted territory, uncertain. I read yesterday that Michael O'Leary of Ryanair, a low-cost airline, Irish one you'll may be familiar with, are refusing to return payments for flights, except where the plane is not taking off for any other reason, and there's no clear. There are some aviation rules, but there's no clear binding point, as I understand it, on him. And I mean, he obviously he has a very strong view, and this is quite in his character. So he may not be very interested in something like this, but everyone else will take a more reasonable approach and want to maintain good customer relations and want people to continue to book their flights with their airline. Systems like this will be a great way to be able to get to a settlement that is satisfactory for the airline or the hotel or the holiday package company, whatever it is, and the client. So thank you very much, Carissa. I've just done a couple of responses. Are there any questions? Nope.
Okay, I can show off a more complex dispute too.
Noam, you give us a question. All right. Well, look, it's oh, I know. Can I just share my screen a second, because there is something to say. Ba, 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 ba. Just a sec, slideshow. Okay, this is not just a word from our sponsors, but this is the training course that I run in online dispute resolution, odrtraining.com. It's been operating since 2007. And within it, I'm putting up a tutorial and guide, an actual written training course in Infinity, so that you take the course. And I'm doing that with everything else that's available, all the other platforms, so that there is a way to get to know what is available in this developing field. And you see there, when you go on the site, there's one of the modules I'm giving free access to, and that's basically, I think, what I briefly showed you before. It's tips on how to mediate through video conferencing, in particular problems that have arisen with Zoom, and some general guidance. One of the actual sessions and modules is about, prior to COVID, was always there in the course, is about how to adapt your skills as a mediator when you're not in the same room as the parties. How do you develop trust when people never meet you? Of course, the person-to-person skill and the developing that trust is so key to mediation. So that's part of that. So there you are. Thank you very much. I'll take that. Stop sharing so I don't have, right.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Carissa. Would you like to end or add further thoughts? Are there any questions?
Yeah, happy to take
Oh, is
questions.
anybody there?
And I can put that, yeah, I know. When you can't actually see them on the screen, they could be anywhere.
Yeah, I've got a lot of smiling faces, and Colin's
Yeah.
smiling.
Everybody's just muted themselves and run away.
Yeah, terrible.
Oh.
Oh,
No,
Colin.
we're here. We're here. We're enjoying it.
You look
Okay.
as if you're a radio announcer or something.
I put the URL for Smartsettle 1 into the chat, so anybody can go there and sign up, and feel free to experiment with the different templates we have there. Smartsettle Infinity is not cloud-based yet. We're working on that, but as you can see, Infinity is a very complex piece of software, so that'll take us a little bit of time. But it is available as a downloadable product.
I think it works just better as it is. My own view, because I think it really needs a mediator to go through. I mean, I can see often there's no reason for the parties necessarily to know that use is being made of it. Just think of it as a tool that the mediator has in his or her toolbox to help him brainstorm solutions and packages for each side. He can try things out, see how the system values it. Because the key to it is getting those interest levels right at the beginning. And that does take experience, but people with experience can help anyone. So if there's anyone who is a mediator and is thinking, well, I've got a case here that might be useful for, talk to Chris about it, and Ernie or myself, and I'm sure some introduction can be set up with hand-holding to get through the setup. The setup has got to be, the more accurate the setup is, then the rest of it will work beautifully. And that is a skill in itself that people need to put the time into doing it. There are people with that skill, and those people can be made available. and it's something to try out. Well, can I just ask, has anybody had particular use of any form of ODR? How much people have been using it in live mediation casework, if you should say? Colin, I would expect Colin. And yeah. And
Jamie put her hand up too, and I see Chuck put up his thumb.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are doing video.
Jamie, what system is that? Jamie?
Are you talking about a particular product, or am I mediating online or doing dispute resolution online?
Well, just mediating online in any way. I mean, you could just use use email, or
I've been doing my own version of not in person dispute resolution for quite a few years, because I've worked from home for a very long time as a lawyer, and I kind of practice law in a unique way. So what I like about it, and I've always liked about it, is making it accessible and affordable to people, because it's cheaper for me as far as overhead to work out of my home.
You use the telephone?
I use everything. I use the telephone, I text. The more things that are available to me now, the better. And having this community where I'm lifting myself to a level that I could never have done without this community, as far as what I know about and I'm exposed to and can learn. So I'm using everything. That's why I'm listening to everything I can, even though I'm trying to work at the same time. But most of the people I'm working with right now understand that I like to do this at a high level. And so this is just exponentially increasing what I know and what I know is available to me and what's going on in the future. So I share that with the people that I'm working with. And I'm a business lawyer. So real estate, construction, horse racing, but I've ended up doing quite a bit of family law in a certain way. I only take people that are going to do a consent judgment. Because I'm a lawyer, I can help them do that. And there's a very discreet, process that we go through, and there's a lot of forms involved. But what I do is help them come to agreement and then help them get their forms done. And so they get a judgment without ever going to court. I've been doing that for a while. And this all certainly has helped, because we file online anyway. We have to. Lawyers in my community, I'm in a small community. But now I have a huge community, so it's fantastic.
Right, and of course, I always say this to mediators: once you're working online, you've got a much bigger marketplace for a start. You've got people all over the world, and also, of course, lower value disputes that maybe are not economic to mediate in person can be economic mediating online.
And I feel like we need to adjust our thinking to an extent. If we really care about bringing justice to as many people as possible, which if you work in the system, that's not happening, hasn't ever happened, then I think we need to adjust, or some of us at least, need to adjust to maybe not thinking about our bottom line so much and being happy to make a living. And, I sort of cringe when we're talking about maximizing our profits or talking about customers, and I adjusted a lot to do the things the way I do them as an attorney.
But what you were saying about the access to justice, the fact that so many people can't afford to take things to court, obviously does create a problem, in the sense that if there is a dispute and the other party knows that that person can't afford to go to court, how one then motivates that other person or the first person, you're with me, to negotiate if they feel that they're safe from litigation. And that's all about interest. I would say that's all about the benefits of interest-based mediation. Very much what Carissa was showing us here with Infinity is really technology for interest-based mediation, where you're just focusing more on what's in the interest of parties. And I deal with shareholder disputes as a mediator, and I also do a lot of online, just without using necessarily have been doing for some time without necessarily needing tools. And of course, in those sort of cases, there often is resolutions that is in everybody's interest, even if they don't deal with whatever matter was in dispute in the first place. And not being sued is not necessarily the end of the matter. It is not necessarily the only benefit. Having a settlement can actually add value to both sides.
I always like the idea, which has never caught fire, but I heard a little bit earlier this morning that got me excited. I would like the idea of pre-filing requirement, have some process. I don't know if it's done by nonprofit, there's a community model, but not for every litigated case. And I just think there's a need, instead of settling 95% of cases after they're filed, how about figuring out a way to settle 95% of them before they're filed?
Yeah,
so you could require it.
Richard Susskind was talking. I missed that. And I presume that's available because he was probably talking, was he about the English system, the online court or the civil money corpus, which
well,
does have an area where you try and settle in some way.
His metaphor is putting a fence at the top of the cliff rather than an ambulance at the bottom. Some of us have heard that before.
I love that.
I'd of course point out that the question of whether to mandate this is a much wider and deeper question that I suggest would be worthy of an entire session in Cyberweek 2021. And I invite anybody who wants to get together to give that, because I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not, and Jamie, I'm certainly not arguing with what you're saying or what Sir Richard wants to build the fence, but I think that the notion of this is the most efficient way, so we should be mandating it, is something that, particularly given our experience with ADR mediation in particular. And how it is interfaced with the courts, because you're speaking about the courts. So how ADR has interfaced with the courts, and what has been the result of mandating on the notions of voluntariness and on self-determination, etc. It deserves a deeper conversation before we rush to implement that in ODR. And now converting to an ODR point of view, when we are offering these systems, and currently the trend is towards the courts, when we are discussing these systems with the courts, we would do well to discuss that deeply as a community. What is the role of the notion of self-determination, voluntary process, as opposed to the notion of mandatory or semi-mandatory, pseudo-mandatory, or just come and listen, that's all mandatory, all of these differing levels. It's not a setting on a system, okay? On a technology platform, or for every setting on a technology platform, the designers have put in a great deal of thought ahead of time. And I think that as a community, this is something that has been on my mind all year, that we need a really deep discussion in the ODR field about this question.
So, excuse me. So just an analogy that I've always thought of is years ago, and I'm sure all this has changed. I was an insurance defense lawyer when I started. And in certain cases, for example, medical malpractice, you had to go out and get an expert to certify. There was a prerequisite to filing. You had to go do that. And so I always think, well, why don't you have to do something in every case before you file? And then as I got more involved in mediation and now online, it just seems like, and you're so right, you can't just go do this. We'd have to have something, and probably not connected to the court, but it would be that court requirement that would make this happen, but you'd have to have something like Richard Susskind was discussing this morning, kind of use his principles of how you put up that fence. And I know there's always that issue of voluntariness, but we've done it already, and I think overall it's a benefit to people and they get on board. That's up to us, to make that exciting for them. And
well, I look forward to that conversation. For now, and now I have to play the role of conversation.
I've thought about it for 35 years, so
I need to play the role of conversation shutter downer because we need to prepare the room for the next session. So I really apologize. There was someone who was trying to speak. If you could limit it to 30 seconds, the floor is yours and you get the last word.
Oh, okay. I was just going to mention that this process is mandated in Nigeria already. Any case that comes to court has to go through some pre-action protocols, and there are some assessors that are going to assess the cases, and if they think that it can be mediated, it goes first to mediation. That's how the multi-door courthouses created all over the country. Yeah. So it's a standard procedure.
Yep. And the question of, again, of mandatory or not has been trialed or just implemented in a variety of places around the world. It's not a radical notion, but neither is the notion of full self-determination. And once again, bringing it to the world of ODR. Where we have
may I mention that it became necessary because the courts were getting congested. In some big cities, it's not unusual for a judge to have 500 cases in the docket. So the courts too were really desperate to get this thing going. And it's really working wonders, I must say.
That is exactly the problem with the small claims court when you have e-filing, that anybody can just file any sort of claim and may not have the basic elements, as Jamie was saying, in a medical malpractice, and same in the UK. I used to do a lot of that sort of work. You have to have at least one doctor to say that no reasonable other doctor of the same skill would do what the doctor in this case did. But then for the higher, more complex cases, of course, there usually will be lawyers, but then people can't afford. But I think the problem is certainly at that lower level where people don't need to take advice, can just go online and take out an action for fairly modest fees, but that could hold things up. And
and there you go. And in a nutshell,
that was the final quick one.
Then it's fine. And the conflicting interest between the court system, which has no inherent value of self-determination. That is not one of the foundational values of the court system. And some would say in mediation, it is more of a value. And that's exactly the clash. And I'm not coming down on this.
Yeah, I believe you can.
ODR field.
I heard it said that one of your compatriots that you can actually take a case to the Supreme Court with actually not a shred of argument or evidence whatsoever.
Well, what a delightful topic for November 4th. Thank you, Graham, Carissa, and everybody. I'm going to, while this conversation has just opened up, I'm going to do the antithetical to me thing of shut it down and saying, thank you. Let's bring this on in Cyberweek 2020. Perhaps there's room to continue it in ongoing sessions. We have a couple of discussion forums that are active. If you look on Cyberweek agenda on odr.info, you'll see a couple of discussion forums that are active. And I think that some of, that this might be, and if it's not there, go ahead and raise it. Today, we'll be hearing from such speakers as Paul Embley, who will speak very shortly at the same link in the same room, although I will be shutting and opening the room in the meanwhile. He'll be speaking. He comes from the perspective, he's speaking about court ODR. He's from the National Center on State Courts, and he'll be discussing the recent evaluation of Utah court systems ODR project, a very in-depth evaluation project on that project, which is perhaps one of the most valuable documents to come out in ODR in this year, which really gives us a sense when we're looking at court ODR, what will work and what won't, what will benefit parties / what will benefit justice, what will benefit the court system. Beyond our ideas of how things should be designed, what happens when the rubber hits the road, it is actually implemented, and what are the impacts of that, what works and what did not. So that's Paul's session in just 10 minutes. We also have a presentation by Alberto Elisavetsky on ODR in Latin America. ODR in Latin America is developed, I think, if you would do it numerically or per capita, it is developed perhaps beyond anywhere else in the world. A lot of that is because of the dynamo otherwise known as Alberto Elisavetsky. and I recommend, or that I don't know, is that presentation in Spanish or in English, Colin, do you know?
I actually think it's in English.
Okay, so
Yep.
everybody learn English really quickly, and then you'll be able to hear that. We also have a session with Amy Schmitz and Chitu Ngajaran on, well, it's on several, Chitu developed CREC, a platform that's been mentioned several times already. So she'll be discussing that. She comes from India and will be discussing ODR in India, but of course she is far more widely versed and involved in the ODR world in general. So I'm sure that that conversation will expand far beyond these topics. If the topic of AI in ODR interested you, so on Thursday, I think at 2 Pacific time, we have a session with Professor John Zalesnikow. Graham mentioned him at the beginning of his talk, who is also developing systems and basically is also trying to map out what are the central features that would be most beneficial for an AI-based platform to offer. You know, set aside whether it's Smartsettle or Family Wizard or Fair Division or whatever it is, what 6 components would make for the best platform. Finally, a far less high-tech discussion. As I've said before, on Friday, I'll be discussing issues that have come up at different points. The question of this transition to the online mediation, mainly Zoom-based. This has been a huge natural experiment, totally unplanned, and people had their preconceptions walking in. And along the way, people have learned a lot. Along the way, people are telling anecdotes, and some of them are starting to become repeated. So we might be learning a lot more about online mediation, even in the Zoom sense, than we used to. And in the talk, I'll try and discuss how we might manage to capture some of those. And of course, I'll also, perhaps beyond Cyberweek and beyond Zoom, though not quite to infinity, discuss, so what's next? Let's say all this is over.
No,
What is next?
I'm sorry to, no, I've got to quickly, I'm blocking somebody in the car. I've just got to move, but I think
that is the perfect moment to say, well, instead of letting them in, why don't you just go ahead and—
I will, but it seems impolite, but bye-bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Let me go ahead.
Hi, Graham.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Carissa. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Carissa.
Hang on.